The former Capitol Police officer, right there, launching a bid for Congress. Harry Dunn, former officer with the U.S. Capitol Police Department, who's been called a hero for his actions stemming from the infamous Capitol riots, announced his candidacy for Congress in part by vowing to stop the same kind of domestic terrorist whose actions on January 6, 2021 were directly influenced by Donald Trump. News One with the details here. He's running. Dunn, who was on the front lines during the Capitol attack, subsequently testified before Congress about how his January 6 experience was largely racist. He used an emotional video shared on social media to officially launch his campaign on Friday, the eve of the third anniversary of the partisan insurrection watch.
On this day, my role was as a Capitol Police officer. I'm Harry Dunn, and that meant putting aside who I am, a father, a Marylander, a Democrat, because I swore an oath to protect our Constitution, to protect our democracy. It's what allowed me to protect some members of Congress who I knew were bigots, who helped fan the flames that started all of this. I put country above self. The problem is, a lot of them didn't. Some of the same people who stood behind us when we protected them went back on the floor of Congress and stood behind Trump. They voted to acquit him. And worst of all, they denied the violence and trauma that led to the death of some of my fellow officers. I couldn't stand by and watch. I had another role to play. I used my voice to speak out, to get into good trouble. And a few weeks ago, I left the force after more than 15 years of service, so that today I can announce I'm running for Congress. We can't ever let this happen again. And you've heard it from Trump himself. He is hell-bent on finishing what he started this day. I'm stepping into a new role today, but I can't do it alone. I believe every one of us has a role to play in this fight. So join me. We've got a democracy to protect.
Now, I found myself swaying with the music. It was psychedelic in a way. The imagery reminded me of a haunted house, but it was all too real. We watched it, right? January 6th, 2021, rather. 2020 was bad too, for other reasons. Bidding launched a campaign for a man who bared his soul during his emotional testimony before the Congressional Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. In an unforgettable and equally unsurprising moment, Dunn, who is an African-American raised in Maryland's Prince George's County, testified during the summer of 2021 that, quote, no one had ever called me N while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer until January 6th. Here is more from Dunn's testimony.
I'm a law enforcement officer, and I do my best to keep politics out of my job. But in this circumstance, I responded. Well, I voted for Joe Biden. Does my vote not count? Am I nobody? That prompted a torrent of racial epithets. One woman in a pink MAGA shirt yelled, "You hear that, guys? This voted for Joe Biden." Then the crowd, perhaps around 20 people, joined in screaming, "Boo!" No one had ever called me a while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer. In the days following the attempted insurrection, other Black officers shared with me their own stories of racial abuse on January 6th. One officer told me he had never, and in his entire 40 years of life, been called a to his face, and that streak ended on January 6th. Yet another Black officer later told me he had been confronted by insurrectionists in the Capitol who told him Put your gun down and we'll show you what kind of you really are.
America, look at your life. Better look at your life. Dunn is running for Maryland's 3rd congressional district, which has been represented by U.S. Representative Jon Ossoff for the last 8 terms. Sarbanes, a Democrat, is not seeking re-election, leaving an opening for Dunn to join the field of at least 9 other candidates seeking their congressional seat. That includes at least 7 candidates vying for the Democratic nomination. The Maryland Democratic primary is scheduled for May 14th. I don't know if he's going to win. Who's backing this courageous former Capitol Police Sergeant, I believe? But I do know he's running because of you. MAGA, cowardly members of Congress who pretended as they were. Remember how we had pictures of them cowering, seeking cover as the insurrectionists were hot on their tails? And within what felt like a few minutes, maybe a day or so, it didn't happen. It was a peaceful tour. Why were you like that? Why are you hunkered down like that? Afraid, counting on the same officers to keep you safe. You are disgraceful. And that's why Mr. Dunn is still here, still telling his truth. I guess he could run away like they did, victimized, traumatized. He could just run away and go live, retire, get the benefit, and just figure something out. But he decided, okay, maybe I'll just join you. This is beautiful and necessary, Rayyvana, to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's really important that we continue to hear these accounts of what happened on January 6th, because MAGA has been attempting to rewrite the history of that day since the day that it happened. They've been trying to lie about how violent it was. And as he said in that ad, people died on January 6th. Police officers died on January 6th. Police officers and security was forced to use their weapons against an angry mob of people pushing through glass after repeated warnings. The trauma of that day is going to stick with the people who were there. But I think it's also important to highlight that he pointed out that members of the Republican Party were there and protected by him, cowering behind him in fear of what was happening. And then they use their platforms and their offices to lie about what happened, to attack people like him who put themselves between the angry mob and those politicians to protect them, and to continue to lie about that it wasn't violent, or if it was violent, then it was Antifa and not Trump supporters, or now their new line is that the people who were held accountable, who are in prison for the events of that day, that they're hostages, that they're political prisoners. And I can see how that would be extremely motivating to do something meaningful with that experience for someone like this former officer who saw that happen before him and is now using that trauma to run for office to try to make a difference. And, like you said, don't know if he's going to win, but he's got a great jumping off point and, got to a lot of attention while he was speaking on what he went through that day. That'll probably help him during the campaign.
Maybe I'll move to Maryland just so I can cast my vote. Is it too late? But you're right. He deserves to be here and speak out as much as he wants. I remember Eugene Goodman. Remember how he lured those pigs who were inside the Capitol hunting Romney, hunting Pence and others, Pelosi. He lured them away. And all he had was his baton, his radio. He didn't shoot anybody, didn't use a stun gun or anything. He just lured them away. And you are so ungrateful. It's sick. I hope people remember that when they go to the poll.